morning on here. Hope you're all doing well, first and foremost. Yeah. Um, it is Monday, October 7th. Welcome. Let's kick this off. There's Mondays, right? We take them a little slow. We want to see kind of what's going on with these markets to get a better understanding of where this week might line up. So let's take a quick note of what the expected moves and what's going on for this week look like. Good morning, Marco. Good morning, everyone else. And to start things off, right, we have the CPI data that comes out this week. So the main economic data release last week, we had the NFP that everyone was excited about. We got a nice little pump on the NFP before Friday. We took a little bit of a sell before markets found lows into the end of the day. And realistically, this week, everyone's kind of watching for that inflation data, that CPI data that comes out for the September reading. So economists generally expect the core inflation to hold steady at 3.2% on a year-over-year basis, to be up 0.3% on a month-over-month basis. And the general expectation is that the CPI print will not be weak or strong enough to affect the size of the next rate cut. So investors will also have the Producer Price Index report and the preliminary University of Michigan survey report for October to digest as the Federal Reserve calendar, the release of the FOMC meeting minutes from the September meeting, and the full slate of federal member speeches could give us clues of what's expected in the November meeting. So keep in mind, there's a decent amount of actually data this week, but keep in mind, bad news is most likely going to be considered pretty bad news going forward. So especially with this inflation data that's coming out this week, with the CPI and PPI, if they miss a little aggressively, right, it kind of puts pressure on the Fed's decision to cut those 50 basis points, where markets are most likely going to see a drop to the downside. You saw the NFP data was pretty strong. Immediately the reaction was a bid through that area. So the event schedule also for this week ahead is dominated by AI events like NVIDIA, AMD, Hewlett and Packard, and the Q3 earnings will kick off with Delta Airlines, Pepsi, JP Morgan, and some of the other big names that are reporting this week. So we have the full earnings calendar today. We don't really have too much. We have PepsiCo tomorrow. We have Delta Airlines on Thursday, and then the banks come out swinging on the 11th, Friday the 11th, JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, BlackRock, Bank of New York, Mellon, and some others there. So decently shaped up data points, right, on things and news events that are expected. Like, for instance, we have Fed's Kashkari that's speaking today in the afternoon, 1:50 p.m. We have Fed's Bostic that goes on the wire on the Globex reopen at 6 p.m. Eastern, and then Fed's Musalem that speaks at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. So a lot of news in terms of the economic calendar to start the week off. In Japan, markets are up almost 2%. In Hong Kong, 1.6%. China's closed. India's down. Europe midday, London up 0.4%. Paris up 1/10. Frankfurt down 0.2. Nasdaq is down about 0.5%. The S&P is down about a bit less than 0.5% right now. Crude is up 2.7%. Gold up 0.4, and Bitcoin up 1.5%. So in terms of some of the other news, right, not really too much to start this week off on the Monday, but BP is scaling back its energy transition strategy and will drop its ambitious target of cutting oil and gas production by 2030, with plans to raise ability. So back in 2020, BP pledged to cut oil and gas production by 40% by 2030, widely seen as the sector's most ambitious target, and this was scaled back last year to a 25% cut, and now BP is looking to increase its oil and gas production, eyeing investments in 3 new projects in Iraq and redeveloping oil fields in Kuwait. It is moving ahead with the development of the oil fields in the Gulf of Mexico and is also weighing acquiring assets in the Permian Basin. And BP has paused investments in a new offshore wind and biofuel project in recent months and reduced the number of low-carbon hydrogen projects to 10 from 30. So the move comes as clean energy projects are facing supply chain issues and rising costs amid higher interest rates. And recall that BP's targeting a $2 billion cost saving by end of 2026, while the updated strategy is expected to unveil in February, and the company has already dropped the 2030 production cut target in practice. So some of that news in terms of reshifting oil. Also, Tesla's most weighted We Robot event, Elon Musk called it one of the one for the history books, is happening finally this week, with the expectations running high for Tesla's robotaxi reveal, and we'll see how that event bodes. Tesla's been doing pretty solid in the past few weeks here. We've rallied pretty aggressively from those lows. And right now, we'll see how these Mag 7s and the big tech names, which are fairly underweight right now, are to hold, right? The underweighting in tech is holding prices back a little here in the general overall market's upside. So we can see that Nasdaq's still fairly far away from its all-time highs, while the S&P is pretty damn close. So in today's session, looking at the S&P 500 futures here and the expected market, we did see a pretty significant drop on the overnight session after an immediate little bid. So right now, we're actually moving back within a larger auction. So as prices have it, selling rallies is the initial move that might start things up. So from about 57.97 up to 5800, that is the final chance area for the sell side to come in and try to push prices back below, as heavy volume is actually accumulating at these lows. So if I'm looking at this, 5800 area is pretty much a pivot on the day for the S&P 500 futures. If prices cannot sell from that area, expectations are to the upside swing. So I'm not like super bearish going into it, but the reality of the situation is on the overnight we moved into an auction to the downside, which puts bearish pressure where buyers can be found at lower prices. But for now, the sell side is trying to hold things out and trying to hold prices a little lower. So for me, if we're still below that 5800 area, it's most likely leaning for a sell in prices, with the midpoint area into these like mid-low 80s on the S&P 500 futures. It's a similar concept here on NASDAQ futures as well. Come on. NASDAQ futures as we have it, right? We've held an intra balance area, but we're within this massive distribution, right? The overnight sold from 2260 area, huge area. On the overnight, currently what's happening is a lot of volumes being created from the final chance of the buy side from 0.50 to 0.70. Right now, we need to see that 140 break to the upside to see any kind of momentum to the upside, but realistically, prices would need to start moving above 263.20 on NASDAQ for that continuation. So I am leaning a little more bearish in terms of selling rallies because we failed to kind of accept with a little head fake peak above the major balance on the overnight session. So that's kind of where things stand. So I hope everyone has an amazing start to the week. It is Monday. We take it slow. We see how these things shape up so we don't get abused and bruised on a Monday. So check out community.tradeproacademy.com. That's our open Discord there where we post a lot of information. And I'll see you guys tomorrow and the remainder of the week. So thank you, everyone. Hope you have an amazing trading day, and we'll wrap up and see as the earnings season kicks off how